You've heard the stats about Portland's historic gun violence epidemic, but the victims are more than just a number. Like a refugee who came to America to escape violence in Iraq.
He was spending most of his time working to try to provide a better life for his family.
Only to be shot to death in Portland, driving for Uber.
What is more painful, they don't feel justice till now. They feel they ignored, they are behind, nobody cares for their laws.
And the recall campaigns against Newburgh school board members are getting heated, to say the least.
And so you're going to use cynical games to try and get back the majority so you can push your views on everyone else.
This recall is not about a culture war. It's not about our ideological differences.
And now the kids are walking out. Here's the story.
Our photographer actually got kicked off of the school grounds getting that video. So you can see he shot it from a distance on public property. We'll get to that story coming up. I'm Maggie Vespo. Welcome to The Story. Contact info is at the bottom of your screen. So email thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag TheStoryKGW. You'll see your questions and comments drive our coverage. So that in mind, let's get started. Gun violence in Portland is an epidemic. We know this. So far this year, more than 80 people have died of homicide, far surpassing any other year in our city's history. And behind every death, there is a story. And that's the point that Paul made when he emailed us, quote, on stories about gun violence and murders on the streets of Portland, why don't any victims have names, race, age, and other information that makes these victims into real people? He added, I feel disconnected when you simply report a shooting and/or death with no information about the victim. Paul, we appreciate you writing in. So to answer the first part of that question, when police first tell us, reporters, about a shooting, they typically don't tell us who died right away. Victims' names come days later. And the reason is detectives need that time to get a positive ID from the medical examiner and then contact the victims' families. They tell the families before they tell us. So in the meantime, we cover the shooting itself with the information we have, which is kind of the format that you're talking about. And then later, we follow up with stories like this. Tonight's big story is that of an Uber driver who was shot and killed while doing his job and chasing the American dream. Here's Kyla Boshi.
Life was a joy and adventure for Dolfakar Masir. From helicopter rides to the great outdoors, the 23-year-old refugee from Iraq wanted to sample everything his new home had to offer. By all accounts, he was living the American dream. Ahmed Al-Zubidi is a friend and a community leader.
He was spending most of his time working to try to provide a better life for his family.
Masir moved to Portland with his family about 5 years ago. He worked as an Uber driver, who was especially proud of his 5-star customer rating.
That's showing how good person he is. It's not easy to get 5-star in Uber. So, and everybody know that.
Even with a language barrier too.
Exactly. In the beginning, I still remember he was using almost sign language.
The fun-loving Masir had recently gotten married after a trip to Iraq. He was working to bring his new wife back to the U.S. and hoped to buy a house. The road ahead looked bright. Until December 11th, 2020. Masir was about to pick up an Uber passenger in his white Honda Accord when he was shot and killed in a hail of gunfire in northeast Portland. Police think Masir was accidentally murdered in a gang-related ambush meant to target someone else. 1 year later, Masir's family still has no answers. There's been no arrest, and the pain of losing a son and a brother hasn't gotten any easier. He was an angel. He was everything for us, said his mother, Athra, speaking through an interpreter. Her living room walls are filled with photos of Masir. Everybody loved him, she said. We came here looking for security and to be safe. We wanted a better future. We lost everything. We don't feel safe anymore. The FBI has offered a $15,000 reward in the case. And according to federal investigators, here's what happened. On December 11th, 2020, around midnight, Masir was going to pick up an Uber passenger in Northeast Portland. He came to a stop outside a home on Northeast Stafford Street near 11th Avenue. Multiple people fired approximately 70 rounds, then got into two cars and took off. According to the FBI, one of the cars is believed to be a Volkswagen EOS, similar to this one.
And here's what's interesting. That car, it's distinct. There aren't many of them on the road. We asked the Oregon DMV to run the numbers and found there are only 99 Volkswagen EOS registered in Portland. Keep in mind, the car could have been stolen or registered outside the area, but it's an important clue.
As is this. The FBI said shell casings at the scene have been matched to casings found at other gang-involved shootings in the area. We don't know which ones, but police records show there were a handful of shootings in the week prior, including two separate shootings just a few blocks away. Clearly, somebody has information and isn't speaking up, leaving the family heartbroken and helpless.
What is more painful, they don't feel justice till now. They feel they ignored, they are behind, nobody care for their loss.
Zulfikar Masir came to America with his family to escape the violence in Iraq. He thought he'd found a better life, full of opportunity. Instead, the 23-year-old became yet another victim of Portland's gun violence.
All right. Kyle Boshi joining us now. So Kyle, all of these stories that tied to Portland's gun violence epidemic are so heartbreaking, but we don't always get to hear from the family. So can you just talk more about kind of why they wanted to meet with you for this story?
Right. Well, they reached out several weeks ago, and the goal was really to shine a light on this particular tragedy, tell the story of this young man's life, but also try and get some answers. The family feels a little neglected. Things have been quiet. They haven't heard from detectives in this case. And I've heard from families of those who've lost loved ones to gun violence in the same way over the past few weeks, that a lot of them, they just feel like they've been forgotten. And obviously detectives are overwhelmed in trying to investigate these cases, and there are a lot of them. Yeah. But for the families, they just really want some answers, and they want to feel like somebody's working hard on the case.
Gotcha. And we're glad to shine a light on his case, definitely. The FBI is also offering a big reward in this one, $15,000?
Yeah, $15,000 from the FBI. As we've been reporting as well, there is a lot of fear in the community, though, for retaliation. Yeah. So the question is it enough money? And we've heard from gang veterans who say it isn't enough money to put their life on the line. One thing we want to point out, though, is that in many cases, especially tips going to Crime Stoppers of Oregon, those tips can be anonymous, and that may allow some people to come forward, feel more comfortable in coming forward, and hopefully to solve a case just like this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, we're glad to shine a light on it here, and our hearts are with that family. So, Kyle Boshi, thank you. All right, we're going to shift gears now. We hit a pretty big milestone today. It's been exactly 1 year since COVID vaccines became available to people in Oregon. And David emailed us asking, I'm curious about the progress of vaccines. Could you please give a vaccine count update? David, thank you for the email. We absolutely can. Cue the vaccine count. 1 year in, big milestone. In Oregon, more than 3 million people have gotten at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. That's almost 73% of the state's population. In Washington, more than 5.6 million people have gotten at least one dose, about 74% of that state's population. But let's talk about booster shots, okay? Because they're becoming even more important with the emergence of Omicron. Studies show 2 doses of the vaccine actually don't protect that well against the new variant. Look at that graph on the left. See how short that purple bar is? That means 2 doses are less effective against Omicron compared to other variants. But the graph on the right shows that a booster shot does really well against it. That purple bar is about the same height as the others, which means a 3rd dose is about as effective against the new variant as it has been against past variants. So, how many people have the booster? Well, about 33% of people in Oregon and about 31% of people in Washington. And those numbers are on par with a national rate of about 28%. So we're doing a little bit better than the national rate. And if those numbers seem low to you, we totally get that. But keep in mind, a lot of people might not be eligible for a booster yet, meaning those who got the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine need to wait 6 months after their 2nd dose to get that 3rd shot. It's also been less than a month since the FDA approved boosters for all adults. Okay. Let's buckle in now and take one more ride on the roller coaster that is the Newburgh School Board, because today students at Newburgh High School walked out of class to show solidarity with Black students in their schools. Those students have been the target, as we reported, of racist incidents, including a virtual slave trade on social media. And many of them are upset that the school board back in September banned Black Lives Matter and pride symbols in classrooms. So speaking of that school board, let's check back in with them now and see how things have been going after, let's be honest, a rough few months. Spoiler alert, it's not going great.
Newburgh, Oregon. You've got world-class wineries, small-town charm, this cute little old drive-in movie theater serving big Grease vibes.
Stranded at the drive-in.
Open for business.
You've got a tiny flower shop that serves as a hub for one of the biggest political movements in town. We'll get to that. And of course, there's Newburgh's chaotic school board.
And this has been the shadiest process ever.
This week, the board took public comment for the first time since they suddenly fired their seemingly beloved, and supporters say highly competent, superintendent. It went about as well as expected.
Dave, you're just going to refuse to answer? Is that what's happening?
It's just not the right way to run a meeting. We're not doing that.
Sure. Okay.
Did you know that birds aren't real? It's a known fact that the government has replaced every living bird with robotic replicas and is using them to spy on us. And I believe the Newburgh School District is likely in on it.
Yes, that really happened. It's been like this for months, ever since the board first voted to ban Pride and Black Lives Matter flags at school. Adults fighting in public, teenagers pleading for reason.
I'm sick of having to sit there and comfort and console so many of my younger queer individual students, Black students who are struggling right now.
There have been protests, lawsuits, threats, and accusations. And if any of you living in Newburgh wanted to go back to your quiet lives, sipping wine and shopping for antiques, sorry. The search for a new superintendent to lead the school district is on. Will the school board put aside their differences to work together on that search?
No, I am.
It's out of order to ask that question.
It's absolutely not. I'm asking a question because there has been such a lack of transparency in this process.
We'll take that as a no. Vice Chair Brian Shannon is now being recalled. The election is in January.
And I wonder what it says when we try to take out one of those representatives because we don't like their point of view, we don't like how they voted on a particular issue. Are you not saying that that segment of the community doesn't deserve a voice? I mean, is that what you're saying? That the folks who agree with me are not worthy of representation? Or is it just that you don't have the majority anymore? And so you're going to use cynical games to try and get back the majority so you can push your views on everyone else.
And board chair Dave Brown's name may also be on that recall ballot. That brings us back to the flower shop.
We've used this as like a little hub.
Where the recall's chief petitioner, Zach Goff, and his team have collected thousands of signatures from people unhappy with, well, all of this.
He's collected, I think, over 700 signatures in the shop himself.
Recall petitions rarely make it to a ballot, but Goff says he knew he had to try once he saw what the school board was doing.
I was approached by a couple parents who were very, very concerned, and they know the advocacy that our farm has done in the area, and asked if we would in any way want to help with this effort. And immediately I was like, yes, I need to be part of this.
They collected 3,150 verified signatures to get a recall ballot for Brian Shannon. To put that in perspective, only 2,170 people actually voted to put Shannon on the school board in the first place back in 2019. And only 1,623 people voted for Brown that same year. Over the last few months, we've repeatedly asked Brian Shannon and Dave Brown for interviews. Brown has refused, always saying he's too busy. Shannon has never responded. But at the board meeting this week, he made himself clear.
I don't think we should have any recalls. It's costing our district money. But I want to thank the folks who have done it, because it's going to give our community a chance to actually have their voice heard. And when we are retained, I don't want to hear this thing anymore that we don't represent the majority. I don't want to hear that, well, not enough people voted, or there was a spoiler candidate, or all the excuses that are constantly being put out. We will know the will of the community in a month, and we'll let the chips fall where they may, and so be it.
Out in Newburgh, they still have support.
You know, they shouldn't be doing a political statement, especially if the school's paying for it. Same thing, if they want to have that up, why wouldn't they put a KKK sign up? Well, they can't do that.
And emotions are running high during board meetings.
And I'm sure you're planning on recalling me next. How about we stop the lawsuits and the recalls and start focusing on fixing all the dysfunction that is happening in our schools? The more lawsuits and recalls you do, the more you're costing our district money.
But recall organizers maintain board members created the problem in the first place.
Before all of this, there maybe were 1 or 2 symbols in all of the schools. You know, because of what they did, there are more now. You know, their attack on the LGBTQ and BIPOC communities created the counter, which created more symbols in schools, more BLM signs, more pride signs. Like, it wasn't actually an issue. They created the issue.
Clackamas County just paid out tens of thousands of dollars after a woman claimed a deputy put his knee on her son's neck.
I mean, he was a child. He was 12 years old. He was held down. He didn't know what was going on.
But the sheriff's office denies any wrongdoing, and the deputies involved are still on the force.
I just feel like they should admit to what the photo was showing.
When the story continues.
Welcome back. Let's turn to a story now out of Clackamas County, where a 12-year-old black boy was roughly detained by sheriff's deputies, and his mom claims a deputy specifically put a knee on his neck. The sheriff's office denies it, but the county is still paying the family $45,000 for what happened. Here's Catherine Cook.
I mean, he was a child. He was 12 years old. He was held down. He didn't know what was going on.
It's been 2 years since Jarena McDavid's son was stopped by Clackamas County Sheriff's deputies. This picture shows then 12-year-old Kamar Benbow on the ground in custody. It was a case of mistaken identity, or racial profiling, if you ask McDavid. She says her son and some friends were at Clackamas Town Center when a fight broke out. McDavid says Kamar and his friends watched, then left, but were later stopped by deputies. McDavid sued the sheriff's office for $300,000, claiming deputies elbowed Kamar in the face, pushed him to the ground, and put a knee on his neck. This week, Clackamas County settled the case. Kamar's family got $45,000, but Clackamas County admitted no wrongdoing.
I just feel like they should admit to what the photo was showing. 3 officers, 12-year-old boy, the knees clearly on the back of his neck. They could just acknowledge that they did something wrong and make a change within their the police officers there. That's what I really, really wanted was a change.
Besides the lawsuit, McDavid also filed an official complaint with the sheriff's office. Their investigation found that no deputy ever put a knee on Kamar's neck and that ultimately their actions were lawful. Those findings mean very little to McDavid. She says her son is still dealing with the aftermath of what happened.
He's still having issues with what he's going to do when he's around a police officer or ever approached by one again. He's a little confused. He's kind of conflicted. Do I stay? Do I go? You know, they hurt me when I stayed. If I go, what's going to happen?
That was Catherine Cook reporting. Still ahead here on the story, if you shop at Fred Meyer and QFC, you might soon have to decide whether to cross a picket line. And that's because workers could go on strike tomorrow morning. And the company is already trying to hire replacements. When the story continues. Welcome back. Take a look at your clock, or let's be real, your phone, because we are about 12 hours away, just under 12 hours away, from quite possibly a major labor strike at one of Portland's largest grocery chains. It's why signs like these are on display right now at the Stadium Fred Meyer on West Burnside. The company is looking for temporary workers for Fred Meyer and QFC stores across the Portland metro area because their normal workforce has authorized a strike. And unless major progress is made, they plan to walk off the job at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Now, earlier I talked to Miles Ashaya. He is a spokesman for the union representing these workers, the local food and commercial workers, Local 555. And he pointed out these negotiations, which started in July, are the first their workers have had since COVID hit.
Grocery workers were touted as being essential since in the very beginning of this pandemic, and they were not treated as such. They were not given priority access to vaccinations. They were not given the equipment they needed to stay safe and keep their families safe. And they were given hero pay for a while. And then when that became it became apparent that the pandemic was going to be going on much longer, that hero pay kind of evaporated. And these companies are making record profits throughout this entire pandemic. And quite honestly, our workers are essential and they deserve more. That's what we're fighting for.
So a big reason why employees are threatening to strike? Well, they say workers in Fred Meyer and QFC's home and combination checkout departments are underpaid. And more specifically, they say the company is refusing to give them details on what those workers are paid, which is holding up negotiations. And I did ask on what basis then the union believes the workers are underpaid. Ishaya didn't have those details, but he said the union has vetted that argument, and he says raises are absolutely needed. Now, reps for Fred Meyer and QFC, both owned by parent company Kroger, told the Portland Mercury, quote, "We have proposed wage increases for our respective 555 associates, affordable health care benefits, stabilized retirement, pension benefits, as well as safety measures to help ensure a safe working environment for our associates." It's also a big sticking point in all of this amid the pandemic. And they also told us today our company intends to follow all local labor laws and legal requirements. Now, based on these signs, it doesn't seem like they're very confident that that offer is doing much to quell frustrations. Same message with the number of ads Fred Meyer has taken out on the Oregonian's website. Scroll through the paper's homepage. We did this today. We saw 1, 2, 3, 4 ads for temporary workers. So yeah, all signs point to a strike. And here's the main point Ashaya wanted to get across.
The most pertinent thing to me and to our members is if we go out on strike tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., that our neighbors do not cross our lines. I mean, most grocery clerks know their customers know them. They go through the same line because they want to be checked out by that grocery clerk. And it's our sincerest hope that the support we've given the community throughout this past pandemic is, reflected upon us, because we need your support. Do not cross our line if we put a strike up.
We have more info on that situation at kgw.com right now. Keep sending in your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to finish the show next. Let's wrap up with that weird holiday decor. Every family's got that one item that, like, scares your guests. Well, for Thomas, it's the decapitated elf on a shelf. It is from 1963, he wrote, and it's seen better days. A little more creepy now. Yeah, Thomas, we agree, especially with that tiny reverent pillow that it and its head are sitting on with its eyes closed. And since we cut this segment last night, let's give you a 2-for-1. TB tweeted, "My mom decorated a tumbleweed for the season. I have continued the tradition." Very Charlie Brown, but like in a Western, very minimalist. We love it. It's weird and we love it. Thank you guys so much. Send in your weird holiday decor. We will happily display your weirdness on this show because we're weird too and we love it. Thank you guys so much again for emailing the story at kgw.com. That is the end of this show. The news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter starts now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.